let's go back to what we were saying. Somewhere around 2002 to 2003, an African American male, an older 50-some-year-old African American male gentleman, was shot down here in the area where I'm at. All right. My great auntie was possibly a relative of the male. We're not sure. We do know he was present on the deeds, but we don't know if he was a relative or not. He could have been married into the family, and he could not have been a relative. He could have been a step relative. I'm pretty sure he possibly was a step relative. All right. Up on the first portion of this video, someone came by in a Charger or another car. It came out in a Charger or another car with a weapon drawn with the psychotronic harassment machine. It seems to me that you've been talking to a person since he was a child. You should go ahead and get the person out of the misery, man. You know what I'm saying? Nobody has time to sit here and break and take away material goods that they've earned until they can't use the material goods so that you can try to kill them and make them feel like they were insane. But this is what's been taking place. There was an officer that was fired from his job, a white officer, for killing a black male. The truth is that the black male had came down here, from my perspective now as an older person, understanding what's going on in this area, to murder myself and my grandfather. We had seen him 2 or 3 times in Utica, Mississippi, coming from Edward, Mississippi. And he had came from Edward, Mississippi. We had saw him on the highway. He had gotten on the highway, and we saw him, and we saw him in his vehicle, and he had chased us, I'm pretty sure. And at that point in time, the individual my great aunt, around 86 or 87 years old, we had found her on the floor. Me and my grandfather had found her on the floor naked. She wasn't naked, but she didn't have a bra and she didn't have panties on. She was basically naked. Her vagina was all out and everything. She was laying out on the floor. At that point in time, we escorted her and got her sent to her closest relative. She wasn't my closest relative, our closest relative, because we had been watching her herd of goats and a herd of cows. Now, the people next door to me are a very serious problem, because they're of the same mind frame as this green man was. He's pulled several guns on me. He shot near to me twice, and today he was the person who shot with a guy from 6008 Shelby Road who shot at me. I don't know if he shot at me or not, but shot in the air near me. I know my ear was ringing, so he possibly shot near my head. So, what I do understand is now that after they've electronically harassed somebody and targeted someone, the individual is not allowed in any form or fashion to use his or her own bodily capabilities to fight or to distract them or to apprehend or fight them back. I do understand that. I do understand that the individuals have not been capable of taking care of their own, you know what I'm saying, dirty work without some entity, some hidden entity. So we do understand that there's a hidden entity that is surrounded around this. So let's get back to the story to the Green guy. Now, what Green did was, we don't know whether or not Green was on the deeds. All we know that property had been sold a long time ago. Nobody was maintaining the property. We knew where the money had changed hands at. We knew where the money had changed hands. The money had went to banks. The money had went to. We knew where the people had went to during the Great Migration after the money changed hands. So whether or not the sum of money that was given for the property was something that he knew about, we don't know. But we do know the guy came out here, and we do believe, and I do believe at this point in time, since he's a criminal, and criminal psychology states that the criminal returns to the place where his crime was most successful. We do know after we found our auntie that we did see him a little bit more than we usually saw him. As if he was watching us for removing her from the property. Because we removed her from the property and put her into an old folks home after she went to medical care into a hospital. We don't know whether or not the hospital found semen or whether the hospital found discharge. We don't know that. We didn't report that she had been raped. All we report that an old lady had failed, and she was not mentally capable of taking care of herself anymore. The guy had came around and he had raped, from my perspective now, the 86, 87-year-old lady. And he was familiar with her property because he had been on her property before. He had been very familiar with the area. He ran to her local pond. He ran to an area where there was an embankment. Now, he was a military personnel. He wasn't just he ran out of the clearing into an embankment. The individual on the day in question that the officer lost his job for, the individual came down to this area, fired on me and my grandfather. Me and my grandfather fired on him. After firing on him, my grandfather picked up our number, which was 601-535-2591. Called the police officers, called 911, we made the report. After making the report, the officers then came in. You know, bells and whistles. They came in as fast as soon as possible. We're trying to clear the air here because someone has lost their job and has probably been accused of something that accused of being racially motivated when at that point in time it wasn't racially motivated. The individual had committed a crime. The individual had committed a crime and attempted to harm two other individuals after committing the crime. The people who had took the people away from him committing the crime. The individual came all the way from Edwards, Mississippi. Might be somebody in the house, man. They're really vocal tonight. It's Saturday, it's the weekend. The weekends are rough. The weekends, they don't have work. They don't have anything to do. They drive around shooting. They drive around drinking, partying, sexing. Ooh, they drive around doing so many things. Getting drunk. They go drop their babies off just to carry out this behavior. In fact, the neighbors just dropped their kids off to come back in the vehicles to drive around pointing their weapon. And every time they point their weapon, of course, we get electronically harassed and you can't respond to him. And he drives off real fast. So, the individual that had been shot in the area was murdered by the officer for wielding a weapon, resisting arrest, firing on an old man and a child, and possibly pointing a weapon at the officer. So the grandfather, I was the last individual. I'm the last individual living, and I don't know how long I'm going to be living. I'm only 31. Who knows the complete details of this story, besides the officer himself. Now I don't know whether this officer is a good cop or a bad cop, or he wants to kill me, or just for making this statement. I don't know, but I do know at that point in time, that officer reacted properly because we had called and reported that the individual had a gun and he was over in the woods and he was, you know what I'm saying, some strangers going on over in those woods. He shot at us. We fired back at him. When we fired back at him, you know what I'm saying, he fired back and he hid into the woods, so we called the cops. When he headed to the woods, we called the officers. We called the police department. The police department came out in the local area. I'm in 2135 Shelby Road. The local police, Hummerville, Mississippi, 390-086, Copiah County Sheriff Department came out. And when they came out, when they came out, they had basically raped a 86, 87-year-old woman because she was a herder. She had a cattle herd, she had a goat herd. She had a cattle herd, she had a goat herd. And they attempted to murder an old man and his grandson with the same guy. Just the old man had a little pepper left in him and he fired back. The little kid, you know, got on the phone. We had a white cordless phone to call 911. At the time we called 911, the guy had went into the woods. We called 911 and it took the cops a while. It took the police officers 30 minutes to an hour to get here. It's a 45-minute drive from here. It's a 45-minute drive from the police department to here. So it's a very long time to get here, considering the roads, the type of roads, the potholes. It's a very long drive relative to, you know what I'm saying, from our perspective. And the county's pretty large, so, you know, he's passed probably thousands of acres of property, 20-some miles, 20 to 17 to 20, 25 miles. So it's between 35 and 45 minutes when you GPS the directions just to get to the county, just to get to the city corporate limits. Not necessarily getting downtown to the police station. When we called the cops, they came. And he was still there. He didn't run away. He didn't do nothing. He didn't try to leave. He didn't try to do nothing. He was waiting for us to fire back. So my grandfather shot this 12 gauge, this pistol, and I had my 410 shotgun, ready to fire back in case this individual fired, because the individual has showed aggression. So the individual had fired. All right. Now, when the individual had fired back, We called the cops because he hit the woods. There was no way to see him. There was no way to protect ourselves from that point. He didn't leave. He stayed there. All right. Now, the argument was the officer didn't have to shoot him. The individual had probably had a weapon. So, I don't know what took place in the woods, but I do know that the individual had, you know what I'm saying, not left after we fired and he fired back. And I do know that the officer lost his job as a result of it, killing this man. So I was told by an elder cousin that the officer had lost the job. I was told by an elder cousin. I didn't know what happened to the officer. Me and my father didn't see anything that happened that was wrong. The man, you know what I'm saying? That man had been, we didn't see, my father made a statement, man, they didn't have to kill him, they shot him in the leg or something to apprehend him. He might have made a statement like that. He should have shot him, but he should have shot him somewhere to stop it. And we don't know what took place in those woods. We know that that guy had been coming around here and he was familiar with those woods, more familiar with those woods than we could ever imagine somebody to be familiar with, as familiar as we were with that property. So we know he had been on that property before. And he had been around our auntie, or my great auntie, at the age of 86 or 87 at the time. She passed at 89. And we had found her fell on the floor, and she had become very ill and mentally ill. Someone had been scaring her. She had become very spooked. And we lived here, and a lot of times, you know what I'm saying, we call ourselves to play it by ear. If we hear somebody driving up the highway, we go up the highway and check on them. We just know something bad had taken place. Her mind frame had changed. She had become more skittish. She had become very, 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 very scary acting, fragile and frail acting. We don't know what she was diagnosed with, what ailment she was diagnosed with, possibly some type of, some cancer, or she died with a heart attack. All I know is that she buried her in 2003. All right. And these individuals from this particular area have been doing it for so long. All right. So we were not able to talk. The case never came up anymore to my grandfather, maybe once or twice after they had taken place. And I'm pretty sure my grandfather's statement was that the man had a gun and the man fired on us and we fired on the man and the man left. I'm not sure what his statement was at the time. I wasn't here, the entire time. But the man was very familiar with those woods, and he was a 50-year-old man. And at the time, I was a 13-year-old kid, and I had never seen him out here. I was in 2003, so I had to be a 14-year-old kid. In the 14 years, I haven't seen him out here, so I don't know how we get that familiar with the woods, 14 to 15 years old. His family didn't own the property. His family had been sold the property, like I said, between the 1900s and 1930s or 1940s at the most. We knew what location they had moved to during the Great Migration. So we don't know why he was here. We knew that he had left and he had went to a more populous town, that they had more things, they had more jobs going on. We also knew that he had been in the military. Whether or not, he was receiving benefits from the VA, we don't know his story and what his tragedy was. But we do know that he was actively participating in the tragedy of someone else. And that he was shot down and gunned down while actively participating in the tragedy of an old woman. In 2003, my great auntie died at the age of 89. She passed at the age of 89. At the age of 89, she passed. She was a Christian woman. She had been a Christian woman her entire life. She the same church that she had been a member at, that she was a child, she's buried at now. She had been a member of the church since 89, and her father and her mother had been a member of the church in that area since that time too. Her father and mother raised her at that church. She went to church every fourth Sunday, just like everybody who went to church. In fact, many times we only went to church because she wanted to go to church. We're only allowed to hold church meetings once a month. That was something that came from Jim Crow law. We're only allowed to hold church meetings once a month. Watch it, boy. Get him if you can get him, man. So that's something that was racially motivated or Jim Crow motivated, but just because we're only allowed to hold church meetings once a month doesn't mean that everybody, it was very good for the community because one church holds it on the second Sunday. So if you want to go to church, you go there on the second Sunday. The one church holds it on the fourth Sunday. The church down the street holds it on the third Sunday. And the church up the street holds it on the first Sunday. So every Sunday throughout the month, you get an opportunity to go and meet different people and different relatives so that you can go to church. And that way you kept your local community very close-knit, because you can't say, well, I don't know this person. Well, you do know that person. You went to that church on the first Sunday, remember? Yeah. Oh, okay. So, and we invited them to our church on the second Sunday. Oh, our church is on the fourth Sunday, but they invited them to this church on the second Sunday. And then when you go to the church that's sponsored on the third Sunday, invite you to that church. And then the church that's sponsored on the fourth Sunday, which is our church, we invite everybody to our church. So it became a very good system of keeping everybody in close contact with each other. And all the neighborhoods of the area and all the preachers and the churches and the church members knew each other. It became a way of keeping up with your family. It became a way of making sure your family was okay. It became a way of organizing and meeting people. So just because you didn't go to church on the fourth Sunday doesn't mean that you didn't go to church on that throughout that month. And then all churches will hold revivals at different times. So you hit 4 or 5 revivals sometimes in them straight. You have church 3 weeks straight. So it was a very good system of keeping the people Christianized. It was not a system. It was a system where people today look back at it and laugh, but they don't know the entire details, because the entire details was a shepherd system. It was a system designed by herdsmen. And the system that had been designed by herdsmen was so that if my cow or my goat or my dogs or something, or my chickens or whatever I own, or my children even get out on your property, you know who my children are. Hey, what are you doing in my pond, boy? You didn't ask me to go to my pond. You see, so it was a system of trust, and it was a system of balance. It was a system of checks and balances. A system of checks and balances, a very well-functioning system of checks and balances that kept the community functioning for 150 years. And it's kind of like that today, but usually the old members died out. The new members are drug dealers and drug addicts, and most of them don't believe in Christianity or Jesus, or if they do, they say they don't believe in the Bible, or they don't want to go there with those old folks. They're going to go out to the club on Saturday night and party out and be too drunk to go to the church in the morning. That was just something that wasn't going on back at the time. And if you were too drunk and you were 25 years old, you know what I'm saying? I know people today that can attest for this. Your mother or your grandmother still going to beat you with a stick till you get to the church house. With a big old stick, she's going to get up and might get a whip and beat you to the church house. Your father might get up and get an actual whip with little metal pieces on the end and whoop your drunk butt all the way to the church house. So it was actually a very well-functioning Christian system. So, far as what a distribution of funds and grace and things of this nature, no one participated in that. We were too much worried about, FDA. Not the FDA, I'm sorry, USDA. We were more worried about the USDA, what the USDA was going to provide for us. Which a lot of us, at some time in turn here in the last 10 years, some of the distant relatives or distant descendants received some funds from the USDA, but not all funds were received from the USDA for the actual people. But people receive funds at the time, $200 or $300 for what they had, $400 or $500, sometimes $2,000, $3,000 for droughts. If that was pretty big money back then. And if you're an old person, you have no bills, and you have a home, and you already fed, and you don't have nothing to do, and you get $400 or $500 a month, then in 2 months you have $1,000, $2,000, $1,500, $2,000 in 3 or 4 months saved up. Only thing you have the light bill is $50, and the telephone bill is $50. You get food stamps, So if you don't want to use your property, you get food stamps and you grow a garden. You grow a garden with deep freezer full of food. So we were not heavily dependent on the system. We were kind of what they call off the grid. So nobody necessarily moan or complain about it. We laughed at it. Oh, we gotta go get some government commodities, some government cheese. That was the funniest thing in the world. Nobody liked government cheese. It was some government cheese. You probably seen the same government cheese in most people's ice boxes until commodity came again, and sometimes commodities didn't come for 2 or 3 months. All right. So only thing we had to pay for were heavy grains like rice, heavy staple grains like rice. And something we got when we had to start paying for meat. It was around that time and age, we started paying for meat and stuff like that, and chicken and stuff. So that was another thing that just had started upon my birth, because usually it's just slaughter a chicken, I've slaughtered chickens, in several places out there. I've slaughtered chickens at my house. I slaughtered chickens at my grandmother's chickens, my great aunt's chickens, my chickens. You know what I'm saying? Slaughtered a lot of chickens. Slaughtered a lot of goats. Slaughtered one or two goats. You know what I'm saying? Not really into slaughtering cows, because cows can hold you big money. But sometimes, back in the day before I came around, slaughtering cows was a big deal. We still had smokehouses and things where people could hold food, and ponds where you could catch a bucket full of fish and freeze a bucket full of fish. So some people were obese at that time from eating so much. You had to control you can practice. You had to control yourself then. So you know what I'm saying? So and we weren't even attached to the system as much as these people are attached to the system today. So we were kind of on the outskirts because we were in a herding community. So that's what happened. So that officer possibly lost his job, wrongfully lost his job, because the person that he shot had committed some very horrible acts of crime. The person that he shot was a rapist and an attempted murderer of a young man, of a little boy and his grandson. And I'm pretty sure the people in that area think that after reading and hearing this report and hearing everything that's been happened, if they know anything about it, if anybody's in the political area and know anything about it, they probably think it was the worst thing that happened, and it's just something that the white folks did. You know how it is, man. You got to be careful. No, this man was a criminal. This man had trespassed on private property. This man had been trespassing on those people's private property. This man had been possibly assaulting the auntie or the old lady that lived on that private property. And I'm not trying to damage his name. What I'm saying is it's possible, it's a high possibility that that's what he was doing, considering the nature of criminal psychology. The circumstances suggest that it's a high possibility that why would he come to that area? And why would he be firing an old man? And why would he come by and ask us for, you know what I'm saying, why don't he come by and ask us, why would you stake out in front of our house? In fact, today, if you go to the same place where his vehicle was parked at, where he was staking out at, there are tracks in the area where someone else had been staking out that we did not catch.